There is a particular kind of person you will never hear screaming. When something breaks inside them, when a word lands wrong, when someone they trusted turns away, when the weight of something quietly unbearable settles over their chest, they do not reach for their phone to send an angry message. They do not call someone to cry. They do not fill the room with noise to drown out what they're feeling. They go still. They go somewhere deep inside themselves, somewhere most people never see, and they stay there. Quiet. Composed. Perhaps even calm looking from the outside. And the world around them continues moving without knowing that something, somewhere inside that person, has just been hurt. You might know someone like this. Or maybe, if you've been sitting with this long enough, you realize you are someone like this. There is something profound about this silence, and something deeply misunderstood about it. Because most people see silence after pain and assume distance. They assume coldness. They assume indifference. But the truth is almost the exact opposite. The people who go quiet when they are hurting are often the ones who feel the most. They are not shutting down. They are going in. Think about how children learn to manage pain. At a young age, most of us are taught, not explicitly, but through the texture of experience, what is safe to feel in front of others. Some children cry and are held. Some children cry and are dismissed. Some children learn that showing vulnerability only makes things worse. That the room gets louder, not gentler. That tears get used against them later. That the most reliable thing they can do with a wound is simply carry it quietly until it becomes part of them. This is where it begins. Not in adulthood. Not in some dramatic moment of decision. It begins in the small, accumulated lessons of what emotions are allowed to exist visibly, and which ones must be handled privately, in the silence behind your own eyes. The child who is not safe to be emotional in front of others becomes the adult who cannot locate the instinct to reach out when they are hurt. Not because they don't want comfort. Not because they don't need it. But because the wiring was laid down early. Pain is a private thing. Pain is something you metabolize alone. And somewhere along the way, they became very, very good at it. Here is something that the psychology of emotional suppression rarely makes clear. People who go quiet when they're hurt are not repressing their feelings. They are containing them. And there is a difference. Repression is when you push something down so far you forget it exists. Containment is when you are fully, achingly aware of the feeling, you simply choose not to release it outward. You hold it. You sit with it. You turn it over quietly, examining it in the low light of your own interior world. For many of these people, the silence is not emptiness. It is the opposite. The silence is full. It is dense with things they have not said, feelings they have not expressed, truths they have turned over so many times that they have become intimate with every facet. What looks like distance to someone on the outside is, on the inside, a profound and solitary closeness with their own experience. Most people will never understand this. And the people who carry this silence often spend years feeling profoundly unseen, not because others don't care, but because the very nature of what they do makes them invisible in their pain. There is an old philosophical idea that suffering shared is suffering halved. And for most people, this is true. Expressing pain to another human being, being witnessed, being held, being told you are not alone in it, genuinely lightens the emotional weight. There is biological evidence for this. Emotional disclosure activates neural pathways related to social bonding. It releases oxytocin. It regulates the nervous system. It is, in a measurable sense, healing. But for the person who has learned to be quiet in their pain, this pathway is not available in the same way. Not because they are broken, but because somewhere in their history, the act of expressing pain to another person was associated with a cost. Vulnerability, for them, is not automatically safe. It is a calculated risk. And often, they have calculated, based on everything they have learned, that the risk is too high. So they carry it alone. And they become quietly extraordinary at it. Because the thing about being forced to develop an inner emotional life, being forced to process things without outside help, is that it builds something. It builds a kind of internal architecture that most people never develop. A capacity for self-reflection that runs unusually deep. A relationship with their own interiority that is intimate and complex and, if they are lucky, eventually becomes something they would not trade away. But it is lonely. God, it is lonely. There is a particular dynamic that often plays out between someone who goes quiet in pain and the people in their lives. The quiet person says nothing. The other person, sensing something but unsure what, asks, "Are you okay?" The quiet person, reflexively, says yes. Because what else would they say? Where would they even begin? And the other person accepts the answer. Because it is easier. Because the conversation was never really about getting the truth, it was about the ritual of asking. And so the quiet person is left holding something heavy in a room full of people who just decided not to look too closely. This is not bitterness. It is simply the shape of the experience. Both parties are doing what they know how to do. The problem is that neither of them was ever taught to do it differently. What the quiet person rarely gets to show is this: their silence, their withdrawal after being hurt, is often an act of love. It is them choosing not to burden the people around them. It is them deciding that their pain is not someone else's problem to carry. It is them trying to protect the relationship by not flooding it with the full intensity of what they feel. They believe, and they have usually had reasons to believe, that the full weight of their interior world is too much. That if it came out, if the real depth of it was seen, something would break. The relationship. The other person's comfort. Some image of themselves that still requires a certain composure to maintain. So they fold it all inward. And they manage. Impressively, silently, alone. What I want you to understand, what I think is worth sitting with, is this: the silence of someone who is hurting is a language. It has its own grammar and its own vocabulary. And to read it, you have to be willing to slow down. When someone who usually speaks to you goes quiet, that silence is information. Not absence, presence. Presence turned inward. Presence trying to figure out whether it is safe to unfold. The people who go quiet when they are hurt are rarely asking to be rescued. They are not waiting for someone to pry open the door. But they are, in the quiet way of people who have learned not to ask directly, watching. They are watching to see if anyone notices. They are watching to see if anyone will simply stay close without requiring an explanation. They are watching to see if the world, just this once, will be gentle enough to reach them without them having to fully lower their guard. And when someone does, when someone simply sits nearby without pushing, without asking too many questions, without requiring the pain to be performed or explained or justified, something in them releases. Slowly. Almost imperceptibly. Because they are not asking to be fixed. They are asking to be witnessed. Quietly. On their own terms. Without the pain needing to be bigger or louder or more legible than it already is, down there in the place where they carry it. There is a kind of emotional intelligence that only develops through this particular experience, the experience of learning to be alone with your own suffering. It is not a superior intelligence, and it is not one to romanticize. But it is real. It produces a quality of perception, a sensitivity to what is not being said, that is often extraordinary. The person who has spent years managing their own pain internally becomes unusually attuned to the silent pain of others. They can sense it in a room before anyone has spoken. They see the person at the edge of a gathering who has gone quiet. They notice the almost smile that doesn't quite reach the eyes. They feel the shift in the air when someone is carrying something heavy but has decided to carry it alone. They notice, because they know the shape of it from the inside. And in this way, their silence becomes a kind of gift. Not to themselves, they often suffer for it, but to the world around them. Because the people who carry their pain quietly are often the ones who carry other people's pain most gently. They know what it is to not be asked for more than you can give. They know what it is to be allowed to be complicated. And so they offer that. Instinctively. Quietly. If there is something like wisdom to be drawn from all of this, I think it lives in the simplest possible place, in the capacity to remain with someone who has gone quiet without trying to make the quiet mean something it doesn't. Not every silence is a rejection. Not every withdrawal is a statement about the relationship. Sometimes a person simply needs to be in the interior of themselves for a while. Sometimes the most loving thing anyone can do is stop filling the silence with noise and simply exist beside it. Patient. Present. Without an agenda. And for the person who has spent a lifetime managing their own pain in the quiet, there is perhaps something worth beginning to examine. Not to change who you are. Not to suddenly become someone who performs their emotions for an audience. But to ask, gently, whether the wall you built to protect yourself has become so complete that no one can find you on the other side. Because the vulnerability you fear, the exposure, the risk, the possibility that what is inside you is too much, has been part of you for so long that it feels like a fact about the world. But it is not. It is a strategy. A reasonable, understandable, deeply human strategy. One that made sense once. One that perhaps no longer needs to be quite so total. You can be someone who processes things internally and also, sometimes, let someone in. These are not opposites. They can coexist. The silence does not have to be permanent. It does not have to be the whole of who you are. There is a rainy evening quality to this kind of inner life. Everything turned amber and soft. The outside world muffled and distant. A cup of something warm. The particular texture of being fully alone with yourself in a way that is neither comfortable nor unbearable, just true. This is where many people who carry their pain quietly actually live. Not in crisis. Not in collapse. In something more like a sustained, low-register solitude that occasionally becomes very heavy. That occasionally asks them to notice it. And if you are sitting with that right now, if something in what I've described has landed somewhere in your chest and stayed there, I want to leave you with this. The fact that you carry things quietly does not mean they are not real. The fact that you do not ask for help does not mean you do not need it. The fact that you have become skilled at being alone with your pain does not mean that is the only option. It means you are strong enough to survive alone. But being strong enough to survive alone is a floor, not a ceiling. Somewhere beyond the silence, there is a version of this life where you are both the person who knows how to be still with their own experience and the person who has, somewhere, someone who can sit beside them in that stillness. Without needing it to be anything other than what it is. That version exists. And you might be closer to it than the silence makes it feel.